The dim light of the late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of Thompson's Italian bistro, casting long shadows across the empty dining room. Jack Thompson stood amidst the silence, his heart heavy with the weight of impending failure. He glanced around at the once vibrant space, now eerily still, where laughter and clinking glasses had once filled the air. The faded photographs on the walls, showcasing happy families and joyous celebrations, felt like ghosts of what had been. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, the tension in his shoulders palpable. "Another day without customers," he muttered, his voice barely audible, swallowed by the emptiness. Bills piled up in a corner of the small office at the back, a grim reminder of the financial storm brewing just outside the restaurant's door. The aroma of garlic and herbs still lingered in the kitchen, a bittersweet reminder of the culinary magic he once created. Now, the stoves gathered dust, and the oven sat cold. Jack's gaze fell on a table set for two, a remnant of a time when couples celebrated anniversaries and families gathered for Sunday dinners. He sighed deeply, feeling the familiar pang of despair. Just last year, the restaurant had been thriving, a beloved staple in the neighborhood. But after the local factory closed down, the customers dwindled, and the vibrant community that had once filled his restaurant began to fade. He clenched his fists, frustration boiling within him. How had it come to this? As the sun dipped lower in the sky, he stepped outside, hoping the fresh air might clear the fog of hopelessness clouding his mind. The streets were bustling, but the energy felt distant, almost foreign. Jack walked past the familiar storefronts, each one a piece of the community he had cherished. As he turned the corner, something caught his eye. A figure huddled against the cold brick wall of an abandoned building. Jack's heart sank as he approached and realized it was a man, disheveled and worn, cradling a small girl in his arms. The child's face was buried in the man's shoulder, her tiny hands clutching a ragged blanket. Jack's instincts kicked in, a mixture of compassion and concern flooding through him. He hesitated, unsure whether to intrude or simply walk away. But the sight of the little girl stirred something deep within him. "Hey," Jack called softly, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "Do you need help?" The man looked up, his eyes wary and filled with a mix of gratitude and suspicion. "Why do you care?" he replied, his voice gruff and tired. "Because everyone deserves a warm meal and a place to rest," Jack said, his thoughts racing. "I own the restaurant just down the street. I can offer you a meal and some blankets." The man stiffened, glancing at the girl before meeting Jack's gaze again. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Jack insisted, holding out his hands in a gesture of sincerity. "I promise. Just a hot meal and a warm place to stay for the night. Please." After a long pause, the man nodded slowly, the weight of his circumstances evident in his weary expression. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We could use the help." As they walked back to Thompson's Italian bistro, Jack stole glances at the girl. She looked no older than 6, with tangled hair and wide, curious eyes that took in the world around her. Jack felt a pang of protectiveness surge within him. He had a daughter once too, before life had thrown him a series of curveballs that had left him alone, struggling to keep his dreams alive. Inside the restaurant, Jack gestured for the man and his daughter to take a seat at a table. He quickly moved to the kitchen, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. He poured his soul into the meal, letting the familiar rhythm of chopping vegetables and simmering sauces ground him. He was a chef again, if only for a moment. "Do you like spaghetti?" Jack called over his shoulder, glancing back at the table. The girl looked up, her eyes lighting up for the first time since he had seen her. "Yeah," she exclaimed, her voice ringing with innocence. "I love spaghetti." Jack smiled, feeling a flicker of warmth in his chest. "Then you're in for a treat." As he plated the steaming pasta, he couldn't help but overhear the man, Dave, he had introduced himself, murmuring softly to his daughter. "It's going to be okay, sweet pea. We're getting help," he assured her. though his voice trembled with uncertainty. When Jack returned with the plates, he set the food down with a flourish, eager to share the meal he had prepared. "Here you go. Fresh spaghetti with marinara sauce, just the way I used to make it for my daughter." "Thank you," Lily exclaimed, her eyes sparkling as she picked up her fork. Dave watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and sorrow, the lines on his face deepening as he took a bite of the food. "This is really good," he said, his voice filled with surprise. "You're a great cook." "Thanks," Jack replied, feeling a sense of camaraderie building. "I used to run this place full-time, but, well, things have been tough lately." "Yeah, I can relate," Dave said, his fork pausing mid-air. "I used to have a real job, too. A decent one, but life has a way of throwing curveballs." Jack felt a connection forming, a shared understanding of struggle and loss. "What happened?" he asked gently, not wanting to pry, but compelled to understand. "I lost everything," Dave admitted, his eyes darkening with memories. "My wife, she didn't make it through. The bills piled up, and I couldn't keep it together. I've been trying to take care of Lily on my own, but it's been hard." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to say something comforting, something to ease the weight of Dave's burden, but words felt insufficient. Instead, he focused on Lily, who was now busy coloring with a set of crayons Jack had unearthed from a drawer. "What are you drawing?" he asked, leaning closer to see her artwork take shape. "A castle," she announced proudly, her small fingers moving quickly across the paper. "And that's me, and that's my daddy. We're going to live there someday." Jack's heart swelled at her innocence and hope. "That sounds amazing, Lily. I can see it already. Castles are magical places." "Do you live in a castle?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Jack chuckled softly. "Not quite. Just a little Italian bistro, but maybe it can be a castle for us tonight." As they continued to eat, the atmosphere in the restaurant began to shift. For the first time in months, laughter echoed off the walls, mingling with the scents of tomato and basil. Jack felt a sense of purpose returning, a flicker of hope igniting within him. Maybe, just maybe, this encounter was more than a chance meeting. Perhaps it was the start of something new, the beginning of a family he never knew he needed. When they finished their meal, Jack cleared the plates, feeling lighter with each step. He returned to find Lily still coloring, her focus unwavering. Dave sat watching her, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Thank you, Jack," he said, his voice steadying. "You've given us more than just a meal tonight." Jack nodded, his heart full. "You're welcome. You both can stay here as long as you need. I can't promise much, but I can promise you won't be alone." In that moment, surrounded by the echoes of laughter and the warmth of shared stories, Jack felt a spark of hope flickering in the darkness of his struggles. Perhaps this unexpected bond was the very lifeline he had been searching for, a chance to reclaim his purpose and, in turn, help others find theirs. Days turned into a week, and a sense of routine began to settle into the once empty walls of Thompson's Italian bistro. Jack Thompson found a renewed sense of purpose in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of sizzling pans and the aromatic scents of garlic and tomatoes filling the air. Dave and Lily had become an integral part of his daily life, their laughter echoing in the dining room, a stark contrast to the silence that had enveloped the place before. Jack stirred a pot of marinara sauce, humming softly to himself. The bright morning sunlight streamed through the front windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He turned around to find Lily sitting at a corner table, her small fingers busy with a coloring book. With a wide grin, she looked up at him. "Mr. Jack, look! I made a picture of you!" Lily exclaimed, holding up a crayon drawing of a man with wild hair and a big smile. Jack chuckled, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel as he approached her. "Is that me? I think I look quite dashing, don't you?" Lily giggled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You look like a chef superhero." "Superhero, huh?" Jack leaned closer, pretending to flex his biceps. "Well, I do have a secret weapon. Want to see?" She nodded eagerly, her pigtails bouncing with excitement. and Jack reached into a drawer, pulling out a wooden spoon. He brandished it like a sword. "Behold, the mighty spoon of justice!" Lily burst into laughter, and Jack felt a warmth spread through him. It had been years since he had laughed like this, years since he felt anything other than despair. Just then, Dave entered the restaurant, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He paused at the sight before him, his mouth curving into a smile. "Good morning, you two," Dave said, his voice hoarse but cheerful. "Looks like I'm interrupting a heroic moment." "Just showing Lily my secret weapon," Jack replied, striking a pose. "You know, the usual chef stuff." Dave chuckled and moved to the kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "I could use a weapon like that to fend off my own morning battles." He took a sip and sighed contentedly. Nothing like a good cup of coffee to wake you up. As Jack returned to his cooking, he felt a sense of camaraderie forming. They were becoming a family, albeit an unconventional one. The three of them shared meals, stories, and dreams, and slowly but surely, the weight of Jack's financial burdens began to lift, if only temporarily. Later that evening, while they gathered around a table for dinner, Jack noticed the way Lily's eyes sparkled with excitement as she recounted her day. She spoke animatedly about the pigeons she had seen outside and how she had tried to draw them, but ended up with a scribble instead. Dave listened with a proud smile, occasionally chiming in with a story of his own childhood. "Back when I was a kid, I tried to draw a lion," Dave said, leaning back in his chair. "It looked more like a cat with a bad haircut, but I thought I was the next Picasso." "Maybe you should show me how to draw a lion," Lily suggested, her eyes wide with admiration. "Only if you promise not to laugh," Dave replied, raising an eyebrow playfully. "I promise," Lily exclaimed, her little hands clasped together. Jack watched them with a smile, feeling a sense of contentment wash over him. He was beginning to find joy in the simplest moments, the laughter that filled the air, the warmth of companionship. It reminded him of the family he had lost, and while the ache was still there, it was softened by the bond he was forming with Dave and Lily. One afternoon, as they sat on the restaurant's small patio, Lily revealed her dream of becoming an artist. She spoke with such passion that Jack couldn't help but lean closer, intrigued. "I want to paint the world with all the colors I can find," she declared, her eyes shining. "That's a beautiful dream, Lily," Jack said, inspired by her enthusiasm. "What kind of things do you want to paint?" "Everything. Flowers, animals, people. I want to make them all happy with my art," she replied, her voice filled with hope. Jack's heart swelled. He thought of his own daughter, who had moved away, leaving behind her art supplies. "You know, I think I might have some art supplies that could help you," he said, a spark of excitement igniting within him. "Would you like to see?" Lily's eyes lit up like stars. "Really? You have art supplies?" "Sure do. Let me go grab them," Jack responded, eager to bring a smile to her face. He rushed to the back room, rummaging through boxes until he found a dusty old bag filled with brushes, paints, and sketch pads that had been untouched for too long. When he returned, Lily gasped, her hands flying to her cheeks. "Wow! You have so much!" "I used to paint a bit when my daughter was younger," Jack explained, setting the bag on the table. "Why don't you take a look? I think you'll find some treasures in there." As Lily dug through the bag, pulling out vibrant tubes of paint and brushes of various sizes, Jack felt a renewed sense of joy. He watched as she carefully examined each item, her little face scrunching in concentration, and he couldn't help but smile. "This is amazing, Mr. Jack! Thank you!" she squealed, holding up a bright red paint tube as if it were a precious jewel. "You're welcome, Lily. Just promise me you'll create something beautiful," Jack replied, feeling a warmth in his chest. "Can I paint a picture of you and Daddy?" she asked, looking up with innocent eyes. Jack's heart ached slightly at the mention of her father, but he nodded. "I'd be honored." Their moments of joy, however, were soon overshadowed by the reality that hung heavily over Jack's head. One fateful evening, As they gathered around the dinner table, a letter slipped through the mail slot, landing with a soft thud on the floor. Jack's heart sank as he recognized the envelope. It was from the bank. "Jack, you okay?" Dave asked, noticing the change in Jack's demeanor. "Yeah, just a letter," Jack replied, his voice strained as he picked it up. He opened it slowly, his hands trembling slightly. The words blurred together as he read the stark warning of imminent foreclosure. His heart raced and a wave of despair washed over him. Dave leaned closer, concern etched on his face. "What does it say?" "It's from the bank. They're threatening to foreclose if I don't come up with the payment soon." Jack's voice was barely above a whisper, dread pooling in his stomach. Lily's small voice broke through the tension. "Mr. Jack, what's foreclosure?" "It means that if I don't pay the bank, they might take the restaurant away," Jack said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Can't we fix it?" Lily asked, her innocent eyes wide with worry. "I don't know, sweetheart," Jack admitted, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on him. "I thought I was finally finding my way back, but now it feels hopeless again." Dave reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Jack's shoulder. "We'll figure something out, Jack. We're a team now. You're not alone in this." Jack nodded, but the fear gnawed at him. He had finally opened his heart and welcomed these two into his life, and now he feared losing not only the restaurant, but also the newfound family he had come to cherish. The flicker of hope he had felt was threatened, and the shadows of his past loomed ever larger. As they sat in silence, the weight of the letter hanging heavily in the air, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were more intertwined than he had ever realized. The future felt uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to fight, not just for his restaurant, but for the family he had found in the most unexpected of places. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue across the struggling neighborhood, Jack Thompson stood in the kitchen of his restaurant, Thompson's Italian Bistro, preparing for the community dinner that he and Dave had organized. The smell of garlic and simmering marinara sauce filled the air, mingling with the scent of fresh basil Jack had plucked from the garden in the back. Despite the looming threat of foreclosure, a flicker of hope ignited within him. This might just be the miracle they needed. Dave entered the kitchen, his worn jeans and tattered jacket contrasting sharply with the crisp white apron Jack had lent him. "You ready for this?" he asked, rolling up his sleeves. His voice held a mix of excitement and anxiety. Jack nodded, stirring the sauce with a wooden spoon. "I think so. We've done everything we can. Flyers are out and people have started to trickle in. I just hope it's enough." Dave leaned against the counter, watching Jack work. "You've always been a good cook, Jack. You just needed to remember that cooking is about more than just food. It's about community, love, family." Jack glanced up, meeting Dave's gaze. "Family. That's something I've been missing for a long time." The two men shared a moment of understanding, each grappling with their own pasts. Just then, Lily, her face bright with anticipation, bounded into the kitchen, clutching a handful of colorful paper. "Look what I made!" she exclaimed, waving the art in the air. Jack knelt down to her level, his heart swelling. "What is it, Lily?" "It's a flyer for the dinner," she said, proudly displaying her handiwork. The paper was decorated with drawings of pasta, smiling tomatoes, and cheerful stick figures. "I want everyone to know it's going to be the best dinner ever." Jack smiled, his worries momentarily forgotten. "It definitely will be with you on the team." Dave chuckled, ruffling Lily's hair. "She's right. With this level of creativity, we'll have the whole neighborhood coming through that door." As the evening drew closer, the atmosphere in the restaurant transformed. Jack set tables, the faded linens now crisp and fresh, adorned with flickering candles that cast a warm glow. The walls, once echoing only with silence, began to buzz with the sounds of laughter and chatter as familiar faces and new ones filled the space. "Hey, Jack," a familiar voice called out. It was Maria, an old friend and loyal patron of the bistro. "I heard about the dinner. This place looks amazing." "Thanks, Maria. It's good to see you," Jack replied, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "I hope you're hungry." The restaurant continued to fill, the tables soon bustling with families, friends, and neighbors who hadn't stepped foot inside in years. Jack moved through the crowd, greeting and serving his guests, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. It was as if the restaurant was coming back to life. As the evening progressed, Jack and Dave worked tirelessly in the kitchen, plating dishes with care. The sounds of sizzling pans and the aroma of fresh food wafted into the dining area, enticing even more customers to join. Laughter and conversation flowed, creating an electric atmosphere that made Jack's heart race with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Jack," Dave shouted over the clatter of dishes, "we're running low on pasta. Can you whip up another batch?" "On it," Jack replied, his hands moving swiftly as he gathered ingredients. He felt alive in a way he hadn't in years, the weight of his worries momentarily lifted by the chaos and joy surrounding him. Just as they finished serving a particularly large table, the door swung open with a gust of wind, drawing everyone's attention. In walked Mr. Collins, the bank manager. Tension immediately filled the air, and Jack's heart sank. He hadn't seen the man in weeks, and the thought of him here now, amidst the jubilant atmosphere, sent a wave of dread crashing over him. "Good evening, everyone," Mr. Collins announced, his voice steady and commanding. "I just stopped by for my annual inspection." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jack's stomach twisted as he exchanged worried glances with Dave. "What does he want?" he whispered. "Just keep doing what you're doing," Dave urged, his eyes darting between Jack and Mr. Collins. "Let him see the community spirit we've created." With a deep breath, Jack plastered on a smile and approached Mr. Collins. "Good to see you, Mr. Collins. I hope you're here to enjoy some of our food." Mr. Collins raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "I'll be here for a while. I want to see how things are running before I meet with you." Jack nodded, trying to maintain his composure. He returned to the kitchen, where Dave was plating another round of dishes. "What are we going to do?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "If he sees how desperate we are?" "Let him see the restaurant as it is now. It's alive, Jack. That's what matters," Dave reassured him, his tone steady. The night wore on, with laughter and chatter mingling with the clinking of glasses. Jack tried to focus on the food, pouring his heart into each plate he served, but his mind was plagued by Mr. Collins' presence. He watched the bank manager move through the dining room, engaging with customers, and for the first time, Jack felt a sliver of hope that perhaps this event could change everything. "Jack!" Lily's voice called out, pulling him from his thoughts. She stood by the entrance, her face lit up with excitement. "Look, everyone's having so much fun. Can we do this every week?" Jack chuckled, kneeling to her level. "I'd love that, kiddo. But let's see how this one goes first." As the clock ticked closer to the end of the night, Jack felt a warmth spreading through him, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. The restaurant was filled with community, laughter, and life. For the first time in a long time, he could almost believe that everything would turn out all right. However, the unexpected visit from Mr. Collins loomed over him like a dark cloud. But as the night progressed, he found himself hoping that perhaps, just perhaps, the spirit of the evening would sway the man's heart. Jack returned to the kitchen, feeling the heat of the stove against his skin. "We need to keep the momentum going," he said to Dave, who was busy chopping vegetables. "Let's make sure everyone leaves happy." "Agreed," Dave replied, his eyes sparkling with determination. "We're in this together, Jack. No matter what happens tonight, we've already won something special." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of Dave's words. They had created something beautiful, a fragile bond of hope and resilience. As they continued to work side by side, he realized that no matter the outcome, they had already begun to build a new family, one that would fight together for a better future. The atmosphere in Thompson's Italian bistro buzzed with life. the clinking of glasses, and the warm murmur of voices filling the once desolate dining room. Jack Thompson stood behind the counter, a mix of hope and anxiety swirling within him. The community dinner had drawn a crowd larger than he had anticipated, and for the first time in months, he felt a flicker of optimism. Jack wiped his hands on a dish towel, his gaze flickering to Mr. Collins, the bank manager, who was chatting amiably with a table of regulars. "Can you believe this turnout?" one of the patrons exclaimed, laughter spilling from her lips. "Jack, you've outdone yourself." "Thanks, Maria. Just trying to bring the neighborhood together," Jack replied, a smile spreading across his face. He glanced at Dave and Lily, who were chatting with a couple nearby, their faces alight with joy. The sight warmed his heart, and he felt a swell of gratitude for the unlikely bond they had formed in such a short time. As the evening wore on, Mr. Collins moved from table to table, engaging with the guests, his stern demeanor softening in the warm glow of camaraderie. Jack watched, his heart racing. Perhaps this evening would change everything. He leaned closer to the counter, straining to catch snippets of conversation. "Jack's cooking is like a hug in a bowl," one elderly man said, his eyes twinkling with delight. "Absolutely. I can't remember the last time I felt this welcomed," another woman chimed in. Jack felt a rush of pride, but it was quickly overshadowed by the nagging thought of the impending inspection. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus on the present. The restaurant was alive again, and he needed to savor every minute. In a quieter corner of the restaurant, Dave and Jack found a moment away from the bustling crowd. Dave leaned against the wall, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, Jack, I never imagined I'd be here, in a place like this, surrounded by so many people who care." Jack nodded, sensing the weight behind Dave's words. "It's amazing what a little hope can do, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm just one step away from losing it all again." Dave turned to him, his eyes serious. "You're not alone in this. We're in it together now, but I need to be honest with you. I've been hiding something." Jack raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I used to be a chef," Dave admitted, his voice low. "A good one, too. But I lost everything to addiction. I was in a darker place than I care to remember. I know what it's like to have it all and then watch it slip away. I'm trying to rebuild, but..." He trailed off, the weight of his past evident on his face. Jack felt a pang of empathy. "I understand more than you think. I've battled my own demons. This restaurant was my life, and I've watched it fade away. I'm fighting to keep it alive for both of us now." Dave's gaze softened. "Then let's fight together. We've found something good here, and I'm not ready to lose it." Just as Jack was about to respond, a loud cheer erupted from the dining room. He turned to see a group of children, including Lily, who had just completed a drawing competition. She held up her colorful masterpiece, her face glowing with pride. "Look, Daddy! Look what I made!" Lily exclaimed, rushing toward Dave, her tiny feet pattering against the floor. Jack couldn't help but smile as Dave knelt down, enveloping Lily in a warm embrace. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. You're going to be a famous artist one day." "Really? You think so?" Lily's eyes sparkled with delight. "Absolutely," Jack chimed in, joining them. "You've got talent, kiddo. We're going to need an artist for the bistro's menu, you know." Lily giggled, the sound a sweet balm to Jack's anxious heart. He felt a sense of normalcy wash over him, a fleeting moment of joy that he desperately needed. But lurking in the back of his mind was the reality of Mr. Collins and the looming inspection. The evening continued, laughter echoing through the bistro, but Jack felt a knot tightening in his stomach as the clock ticked closer to the hour of reckoning. He glanced over at Mr. Collins, who was now engaged in conversation with a group of patrons, smiling and laughing. Perhaps they had made enough of an impression to sway him, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Then, just when Jack thought he might gather himself for a moment of respite, Mr. Collins cleared his throat, drawing the attention of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're enjoying the evening. I'd like to announce that as part of our annual review, I will be conducting a surprise inspection of the kitchen shortly. Jack's heart dropped. The blood rushed from his face as panic surged through him. He exchanged a wide-eyed glance with Dave, who seemed to sense the tension in the air. Jack felt the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. This was it. The moment that could either make or break him. "Are you serious?" Dave muttered under his breath, his expression mirroring Jack's alarm. "I can't," Jack stammered, backing away slightly, his mind racing. "The kitchen isn't ready. I didn't even think." "Jack, breathe," Dave urged, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Just take a moment. You've got this. Remember, you're not alone." Jack took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "I don't know what I'm going to do if he finds something wrong. I can't afford any more setbacks." "Focus on what you can control," Dave replied, his voice calm. "Just show him what you've created here tonight, the heart of this place." With a resolve he didn't quite feel, Jack nodded, forcing himself to push past the rising tide of anxiety. "You're right. I've worked too hard to let fear take over now." He straightened his back, determination flooding through him. As the minutes ticked away, Jack prepared himself for the impending inspection. He glanced around the restaurant, taking in the vibrant atmosphere that he had fought to recreate. The laughter, the warmth, the community, all of it felt like a lifeline. He couldn't let it slip away now. Suddenly, Mr. Collins approached the kitchen door, and Jack felt a wave of nausea wash over him. This was it. He could hear the chatter of the patrons fading into the background as he focused on the man who held the key to his future. Jack stepped forward, ready to face whatever was to come, his heart pounding like a drum. "Are you ready?" Mr. Collins asked, a glint of curiosity in his eyes. Jack straightened his shoulders, swallowing hard, and nodded. "Let's do this." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the bustling streets, Jack Thompson felt a knot of anxiety twist in his stomach. He stood in the cramped kitchen of Thompson's Italian bistro, watching Mr. Collins, the bank manager, scrutinize every corner with a hawk-like gaze. The clattering of pots and the hum of the stove seemed like a distant echo as Jack focused on the man in the crisp suit, who held his future in his hands. "Everything seems adequate," Mr. Collins remarked, his voice flat as he inspected a stack of dirty pots piled high in the corner. Jack's heart raced. Adequate? That was hardly a compliment. He wiped his brow, beads of sweat forming despite the coolness of the kitchen. We've been busy," Jack stammered, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Community dinner tonight, you know, trying to get back on our feet." He gestured vaguely toward the dining area, where laughter and chatter filled the air, a stark contrast to the apprehension brewing in his chest. "Is that so?" Mr. Collins replied, his eyes narrowing as he turned to face Jack. "You know, it's not just about the food, it's about the cleanliness, the organization. You can't afford to have any slip-ups." Jack nodded, swallowing hard. He understood the stakes, but he had poured everything he had into this place, and it was not just a restaurant to him. It was a lifeline. Suddenly, a small voice broke through the tension. "Daddy, can I help?" Lily's bright eyes sparkled with excitement as she peeked into the kitchen. Jack's heart swelled at the sight of her innocence, a beacon of light amidst the looming shadows of his worries. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, relief washing over him momentarily. "Just be careful, okay?" Lily nodded eagerly and bounded into the kitchen, her small hands reaching for a bowl. However, her enthusiasm quickly turned into calamity when she accidentally knocked over a pot that had been precariously teetering on the edge of the counter. The clang echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot, and Jack's heart dropped as he turned to see the chaos unfold. "Lily!" he exclaimed, rushing forward. But it was too late. The pot clattered to the floor, splattering a mix of sauce and ingredients everywhere. Jack's face flushed with panic as he glanced at Mr. Collins, whose eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Is this how you run your kitchen?" Mr. Collins questioned, his tone sharp, but Jack could see a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Just a little mishap, sir," Jack replied, scrambling to his feet and trying to assess the damage. He knelt beside Lily, who looked up at him with wide eyes, clearly terrified. "It's okay, honey. Let's just clean this up, all right?" "I didn't mean to," Lily said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to help." I know," Jack soothed, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "Let's get this sorted out." He felt the pressure mounting, the weight of his restaurant's future pressing down on him like a heavy fog. "Looks like you could use some help," Dave said, appearing in the doorway, his expression a mix of concern and amusement. He rushed over, grabbing a cloth to help wipe up the mess. "No use crying over spilled sauce, right?" "Right," Jack replied, a hint of gratitude in his voice. "Thanks, Dave." As the three of them worked together to clean the kitchen, the atmosphere shifted. Jack could feel the tension easing, the warmth of camaraderie enveloping them. Lily giggled as she splashed some sauce onto Dave, who feigned shock and pretended to be offended, drawing laughter from Jack. "Just wait until I tell your father how you've turned me into a work of art," Dave exclaimed dramatically, wiping sauce from his cheek. Jack felt a genuine smile break across his face. "You're lucky I don't charge for this kind of entertainment, Dave." Just then, Mr. Collins stepped closer, observing their little scene with a bemused expression. "You know," he said slowly, "it's moments like these that remind me of what a restaurant is really about. The people, the passion, the community." Jack glanced up, surprised by the shift in Mr. Collins's demeanor. "You mean that?" he asked cautiously. "Of course," Mr. Collins replied, crossing his arms. "You have a good team here, Jack, but it's not enough to just have heart. You need to show that in your operations too." As they finished cleaning up, Jack felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Could it be that Mr. Collins was beginning to see the value in what they were building? He glanced at Lily, who was now humming a tune to herself as she helped Dave stack the pots back in place, her innocence radiating warmth. "All right, let's get back to work," Jack said, pushing his worries aside. "We need to make sure everything is perfect for tonight." "On it, chef," Dave responded, a playful grin on his face as he took a spatula and waved it like a sword. Lily giggled again, and for a moment, Jack felt like they were not just a struggling restaurant, but a family, one that transcended their circumstances. As the evening approached, the restaurant began to fill with patrons, the aroma of Jack's cooking wafting through the air, mingling with laughter and chatter. Jack stood at the pass, plating dishes with newfound vigor, buoyed by the supportive energy surrounding him. Just as he was starting to feel a sense of normalcy, Mr. Collins approached him once more, this time with a thoughtful expression. "Jack," he began, "I've been impressed with what I've seen tonight. The community really seems to rally around you. It says a lot." "Thank you," Jack replied, feeling a mixture of pride and apprehension. "But I know we have a long way to go." "True," Mr. Collins acknowledged. "However, I'm willing to give you a second chance." The words hung in the air like a lifeline, and Jack's heart raced. "But I'll need to set some strict conditions to ensure you stay on track." Jack nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. "What do you need from me?" "I'll outline a plan for you, but first, I want to see you take charge of your operations. You need to prove that you can sustain this momentum." Jack's breath caught in his throat, a mixture of relief and determination flooding his senses. "I can do that. I will do that." "Good," Mr. Collins smiled. "But remember, this is a team effort. You have a great support system here, and you need to lean on them." As Mr. Collins walked away, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He turned to Lily and Dave, who were deep in conversation, animatedly discussing the art supplies he had given Lily. "Did you hear that?" Jack exclaimed, unable to contain his excitement. "We have another chance." Lily squealed with delight, and Dave clapped Jack on the back, grinning widely. "I knew you could do it, Jack. We're in this together." In that moment, surrounded by laughter, hope, and the smell of delicious food, Jack realized that the ties binding them had grown stronger. They were not just fighting for a restaurant, they were fighting for each other, for the family they had become amid their struggles. As the night wore on, Jack served dish after dish, each plate a testament to their collective effort. With every smile from the customers and every compliment that floated back to the kitchen, Jack felt the flickers of hope transform into a roaring fire of determination. They had faced chaos, but they had also found joy in the little moments, discovering strength and unity. And as the last plate was served, Jack knew that while the road ahead might be fraught with challenges, they were ready to face it together. As the last remnants of the evening's dinner crowd trickled out of Thompson's Italian bistro, a palpable sense of relief washed over Jack Thompson. The tension that had gripped him during the bank inspection had lifted, replaced by a cautious optimism. He leaned against the counter, wiping down the surfaces, while Dave and Lily chatted animatedly at a nearby table, their laughter echoing in the emptying restaurant. Jack couldn't help but smile as he watched them. The bond they had formed felt almost magical, a family forged in the fire of hardship, each member providing strength to the others. But just as he began to revel in the moment, his phone buzzed on the counter, pulling his attention away from the warmth of their shared laughter. "Excuse me for a sec," Jack said, raising a finger. He picked up the phone, glancing at the unknown number flashing on the screen. His heart raced slightly. He had been avoiding calls from anyone connected to his past, particularly his estranged brother, Mark. Hesitantly, he swiped to answer. "Jack?" The voice on the other end was heavy, laden with a mix of urgency and reluctance. "Mark?" Jack's voice caught in his throat. The years of silence had turned their names into echoes of a distant past. "What's going on?" "I have something important to tell you," Mark began, his tone grave. "It's about Dad." Jack's stomach dropped. His father had passed away years ago, leaving a chasm of unresolved issues and unspoken words between them. "What about him?" Jack asked, bracing himself for whatever revelation was to come. Mark took a deep breath, and Jack could almost hear the wheels turning in his brother's mind. He had a will that was never disclosed. It turns out he owned a chain of restaurants. "You're a co-owner now, along with me." Silence enveloped Jack like a thick fog. Co-owner of a restaurant chain? His mind raced, the implications crashing over him like waves against a rocky shore. "Are you serious?" he finally managed to croak out. "Yeah," Mark replied, his voice steadier now. "I'm not sure how it all works, but we need to speak about this. I can help you with the legal stuff. You don't have to face this alone." Jack's heart raced as the fog began to clear. This could be the lifeline he had desperately needed. He glanced over at Dave and Lily, who were still engaged in their playful banter, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in Jack's mind. "When can we meet?" Jack asked, urgency creeping into his tone. "Tomorrow morning," Mark replied. "We'll sort this out. Just remember, it's a lot to take in." "I will," Jack said, hanging up the phone, his mind whirling with possibilities. He turned to Dave and Lily, who had been watching him with curiosity. "What's wrong, Jack?" Lily asked, her innocent eyes wide with concern. "Nothing, kiddo. Everything's going to be all right," Jack replied, forcing a smile. "Actually, there's some really good news." Dave raised an eyebrow, sensing the shift in Jack's demeanor. "What is it?" "I just found out I might have a way to save the restaurant for good," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm a co-owner of a restaurant chain that my father owned. This could change everything for us." Dave's face lit up, a mixture of disbelief and joy flashing across his features. "Are you serious? That's amazing, Jack!" Lily jumped up from her seat, clapping her hands. "Does that mean we can stay here forever?" she exclaimed, her excitement infectious. Jack nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Yes, it means we can stay together, and I can finally provide for you both the way I've wanted to." They embraced, the warmth of the moment wrapping around them like a thick blanket on a cold night. For a fleeting moment, their worries faded into the background, replaced by dreams of a brighter future. But just as they began to celebrate, a sudden gasp from Dave cut through the air. "Dave?" Jack turned, noticing that his friend had gone pale. "What's wrong?" I don't feel so good," Dave stammered, his voice shaky as he stumbled backward, grasping the back of a chair for support. "Dave!" Jack rushed to his side, panic gripping him. "What's happening?" "I just need to sit down," Dave whispered, but as he attempted to lower himself into a chair, his legs buckled beneath him. He collapsed onto the floor, a pained expression crossing his face. "Call for help," Jack shouted, his voice rising in urgency. Lily stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear, but Jack quickly knelt beside Dave, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Stay with me, buddy. Help is coming." Dave's breathing became labored, and Jack could see the sheen of sweat on his forehead, the pallor of his skin alarmingly evident. "I'm sorry, Jack," Dave gasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want you to know." "Know what?" Jack pressed, trying to keep his voice calm, even as his heart raced with panic. "I've been sick for a while. I didn't want to burden you or Lily," Dave murmured, his eyes fluttering shut for a moment. "I didn't want to ruin your chance at a new beginning." "You're not a burden, Dave. You're family," Jack insisted, feeling the weight of their shared struggles pressing down on him. "Just hold on, please. Help is on the way." Lily knelt beside them, her small hand resting on Dave's arm, her voice trembling. "Please don't leave us, Dave. We love you." Tears streamed down Jack's face as he realized the fragility of their newfound family. The very foundation of hope they had started to build was now under threat, and he was determined to fight for it. "You're going to be okay, Dave," he said fiercely. "We're going to get through this together." Footsteps echoed from outside, and Jack heard the distant sound of sirens approaching. He squeezed Dave's shoulder, refusing to leave his side. "Just hold on, my friend. You're not alone." In that moment, Jack understood that their fates were intertwined, bound by the struggles they had faced and the love they had begun to forge. As the sirens grew closer, Jack felt a surge of determination. He would fight. Not just for his restaurant, but for the family they had become, no matter what it took.